April 1943. Berlin. Rain drips from the iron eaves of the Wilhelmstrasse, the heart of the Nazi government quarter. Inside the marble corridors of the German Foreign Ministry, typewriters clatter like distant gunfire. Clerks in gray uniforms shuffle documents stamped Geheim, secret. Among them walks a man whose face no one remembers, whose name is spoken only on memos. Erwin Respondek. 40 years old, soft-spoken, and bespectacled. He is the picture of bureaucratic obedience. His work takes him between departments, moving memoranda between the Wehrmacht operations staff, the Foreign Office, and the Ministry for Armaments. Every morning he arrives precisely at 8. Every evening he leaves precisely at 6. No one notices that, twice a week, he detours before going home, down a quiet street near Tiergarten, where he steps into a second-floor flat above a tailor's shop. Inside, behind curtains drawn tight, Respondek lays out a single sheet of carbon paper, a fountain pen, and a strip of tissue-thin tracing film. From his briefcase he removes folded military directives, troop redeployments to the Eastern Front, ammunition supply forecasts, airfield construction reports. He copies them quickly, his breathing steady. Every line he writes carries the weight of a death sentence. For himself, if caught, or for thousands of men on the front, if not. By midnight, the documents are returned to his briefcase. The copies, rolled into a cylinder the size of a cigarette, are sealed inside a hollow metal pen. That pen will change hands the next day in a crowded cafe on Kurfürstendamm during a 5-second brush past a man reading Pravda behind a German newspaper. The message will travel through underground channels to Soviet intelligence, who have given Respondek the codename Arno. His reports describe the German army's massive preparations for a summer offensive near Kursk, the largest tank assault in history. Soviet analysts, skeptical at first, begin to notice that Respondek's information aligns with intercepted radio traffic. His latest dispatch lists divisions, armor strength, and attack dates. One paragraph, written in his cramped hand, reads simply, "The offensive will begin in early July. Its name is Zitadelle. The intention is encirclement. The scale will exceed Stalingrad." Back in Berlin, Respondek's outward life continues, untouched. He dines with colleagues, toasts victory for the Reich, and answers routine questions from Gestapo censors inspecting Foreign Ministry staff. He even receives a commendation for exceptional reliability. But each time he glances at his reflection in a window, he knows it could be the last day he walks free. Somewhere deep in the Russian steppe, Red Army engineers are digging trenches and laying mines based on the details from those secret rolls of tracing film. And far above, clouds gather over the plains of Kursk, waiting for the battle his pen has already begun to shape. July the 2nd, 1943. Moscow. A summer storm rolls over. The Kremlin. Lightning flashing across the spires. Inside a windowless room beneath the General Staff Building, Soviet officers crowd around a long oak table. At its head sits Marshal Georgy Zhukov, his jaw clenched, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. Before him lies a thin dossier, marked Source Arno. Zhukov reads the summary aloud. Operation Citadel, objective. Encircle Soviet forces in the Kursk salient. German 9th Army advancing from north. 4th Panzer Army from south. Expected start, July 5th. He looks up at General Rokossovsky and General Vatutin, the two men commanding the Soviet flanks. If this report is true, he says quietly, then they have already begun fueling their tanks. Around the table, the EED officers exchange glances. Weeks earlier, Soviet reconnaissance flights had reported vast German troop concentrations near Orel and Belgorod, Tiger and Panther tanks arriving by the hundreds. But now, Respondek's intelligence confirms the plan's timing and scope with chilling precision. Zhukov exhales. "We will not attack first," he says. "Let them come." In the days that follow, Soviet forces prepare the largest defensive network in military history. Minefields stretching 200 miles, interlocking artillery zones, and camouflaged anti-tank positions hidden in wheat fields. Every move, every trench, every ambush is guided by Respondek's information. While soldiers dig in on the steppe, in Berlin, Respondek continues his quiet rebellion. He now works as an economic liaison between the Wehrmacht and industrial suppliers, which grants him access to rail movement reports and logistical summaries. The arteries of war. Late one night, he intercepts a message from the Army High Command noting delays in fuel shipments to the 4th Panzer Army. He copies it in miniature and passes it through his contact chain. It will reach Moscow in 48 hours. On July 5th, dawn breaks over Kursk. Thousands of German guns open fire, lighting up the horizon like a storm of iron. Columns of tanks roll forward, Tigers, Panthers, Panzer IVs, their treads crushing the steppe under smoke and thunder. Yet everywhere they advance, they meet prepared fire. Soviet minefields detonate beneath the armor columns. Katyusha rockets streak from concealed ridges. The Red Army does not yield. They knew exactly where the enemy would strike. North and south, converging toward Prokhorovka. German commanders, stunned by the precision of Soviet resistance, begin suspecting their plans were leaked. But by then, it's too late. Inside the Kremlin, Zhukov receives the first radio reports from the front. "Citadel has failed to break through," an officer says. Zhukov nods once. Then, the counterattack begins. By mid-July, the Battle of Kursk turns into a slaughter. The 4th Panzer Army loses more than half its armor in 3 days. Hitler, alarmed by Allied landings in Sicily, orders the offensive halted. The Wehrmacht retreats, bleeding, exhausted, broken. And somewhere in Berlin, the man who made it possible sits quietly at his desk, typing up a report on grain exports to Hungary. He keeps his head low, his tone neutral. The radio in the corner murmurs German propaganda about a strategic withdrawal. He knows the truth. The defeat at Kursk has sealed Germany's fate. That night, as the city darkens under another Allied bombing raid, Respondek hides a new roll of tracing paper in his jacket. The documents this time are more dangerous than ever. Orders concerning troop movements to defend the Western Front. If he's caught, the Gestapo won't need evidence. Suspicion alone will mean torture and death. But he goes anyway. Because for men like Erwin Respondek, silence is complicity. And his war is fought not with bullets, but with ink. October 1943. Berlin. Autumn fog hangs heavy over the ruined city. Allied bombers have left their mark. Rows of shattered buildings. Line Wilhelmstrasse, windows blown out, roofs gone. Inside the Foreign Ministry, clerks work by candlelight. Typewriters rattle. The faint smell of smoke seeps through the corridors. Among them, Erwin Respondek moves like a shadow, collecting dispatches no one else dares read too closely. He's grown thinner. The air raids, the rationing, the constant risk have worn him down. Yet his routine remains unbroken. Each night, after curfew, he slips through back streets to meet his Soviet contact, a courier disguised as a postal worker. They never speak more than 3 sentences. The exchange is always the same: a parcel of blank envelopes and a newspaper folded over one containing a microfilm strip no longer than a match. That strip will cross half of Europe, through neutral, diplomats in Stockholm, coded cables from Warsaw, and finally into Moscow. Inside, it carries maps of German defensive lines on the Dnieper, new orders from the OKH, and casualty reports so grim even Berlin's own officers barely believe them. Each document Respondek copies deepens the Kremlin's picture of a collapsing German war machine. His intelligence allows Soviet generals to predict where the Wehrmacht will dig in next and when it will have to retreat. His reports prove so accurate that Moscow assigns him a special designation: the source in the heart. But with precision comes danger. In November, the Gestapo begins tightening its net. Counterintelligence officers under Reinhard Gehlen, the Abwehr's analytical chief, suspect leaks inside the civilian ministries. They arrest secretaries, intercept mail, and install listening devices in government offices. Respondek notices small things: his colleagues' sudden silences, a missing file from his drawer, footsteps that echo one beat too close behind him. He knows his time is running out. That winter, the Soviets push westward. Kiev falls in November. By January 1944, the Red Army crosses the old Polish frontier. Each success carries the faint signature of his work. Still, he tells no one, not even his wife, where he disappears to at night. In March, an Allied bombing raid tears through central Berlin. Flames sweep across Wilhelmstrasse. Entire wings of ministries are reduced to rubble. In the chaos, Respondek seizes an opportunity. Using the confusion, he removes a series of files from the Foreign Office archive. Plans outlining the German intention to destroy bridges and railways during their retreat from Ukraine. He hides the microfilm in the lining of his overcoat, walking calmly past guards as sirens wail above. For days afterward, he cannot sleep. Each knock at the door feels final. Then, in early April, his fears materialize. He's summoned to the ministry's security office for routine questioning. The man waiting inside wears a black SS uniform and smiles too politely. "Herr Respondek," he says, "we're reviewing personnel with access to classified material. You've handled troop dispatches, yes?" Respondek nods. "As required by my post." The SS officer studies him for a long moment. "You've been seen near the Tiergarten after curfew. Care to explain?" Respondek feels his pulse quicken. He forces a thin smile. "I feed stray dogs," he says quietly. The officer chuckles. "How patriotic." He stamps the file closed. "You may go." Respondek leaves, without showing a flicker of relief. He knows the Gestapo rarely closes a file once opened. It's only a matter of time before they return. That night, he sends one last message through his Soviet contact, a warning that Berlin itself will soon fall. After that, he burns his code papers, dismantles his copying tools, and buries what remains under the floorboards of his apartment. He is finished as a spy, but his work will continue to speak long after he's gone. Because by then, the Reich is dying, and the front he fought for exists no longer in trenches, but in the quiet. Resistance of men who chose truth over obedience. April 1945. Berlin. The city burns. Soviet artillery thunders day and night, shaking plaster from ceilings, shattering the last illusions of Hitler's Reich. In the basement of the Foreign Ministry, water drips from cracked pipes onto piles of charred paper. Records of a dying empire. The air reeks of smoke, fear and damp stone. In a corner office stripped bare of furniture, Erwin Respondek sits at a small desk, a single candle flickering beside him. Around him lie the remnants of what once was power: torn maps, melted telephones, empty safes. Each distant explosion draws closer. He knows the Soviets are only miles away, the same Soviet army he has secretly aided for 2 years. Yet, his IB situation is perilous. The Gestapo is still executing suspected traitors in the ruins, their files thinning but their vengeance sharp. His own dossier, marked with a red tab and the word Überwachung, surveillance, still circulates somewhere in those piles. For days he hides among the chaos, blending in with the frantic clerks evacuating archives to nowhere. He watches. Men in SS uniforms burn documents by the ton, the flames painting their faces orange against the black smoke. One afternoon, he sees Colonel Robin Mielke, a former colleague, shot in the courtyard for defeatism. Respondek turns away and keeps walking, his face expressionless. When the shelling reaches Wilhelmstrasse, he flees to his apartment near Tiergarten. The streets are unrecognizable. Corpses in gutters, shattered trams, civilians dragging suitcases toward the western districts. That night, he hears tank treads grinding closer. Soviet T-34s. The army he fed with stolen truth has come home. At dawn, the Red Army enters Berlin. Soldiers in dust-covered uniforms kick open doors, clearing buildings room by room. In the chaos, Respondek does the only thing that makes sense to him. He surrenders. When Soviet troops reach his building, he steps into the hallway with his hands raised, shouting in broken Russian, "Ja pomogal vam! I helped you!" At first, they do not believe him. He is arrested, bound, and taken to a makeshift command post inside a wrecked schoolhouse. For hours he waits, cold and silent, until a political officer finally arrives. The officer, a stocky man with a leather holster and a weary face, unfolds a translated note from Moscow. It bears Respondek's code name. Arno, the officer, studies him, then nods slowly. "You gave us Kursk," he says in Russian-accented German. Comrade Zhukov remembers. Respondek exhales, his shoulders slumping for the first time in months. The Soviets debrief him for weeks, confirming his role in passing intelligence during 1943 and 1944. They treat him not as a prisoner, but as a curiosity, a man who fought his own government with nothing but conscience and paper. When the war ends, they quietly release him. He disappears into the ruins of post-war Germany, teaching economics under an assumed name, rarely speaking of what he did. His service remains classified in Soviet archives for decades. It is only years later, long after his death, that declassified reports reveal the truth. During the months before the Battle of Kursk, his intelligence altered Soviet defensive planning across the entire Central Front. His details on troop dispositions and fuel shortages gave the Red Army the edge it needed to endure the German assault. Analysts estimated that his warnings saved tens of thousands of soldiers from encirclement, perhaps the difference between victory and catastrophe. In official Soviet records, one line marks his file closed. Agent Arno operated in enemy capital. Work excellent. Reliability complete. Today, his name is almost forgotten. No statues, no medals, no parades. Only a quiet footnote in the chronicles of a war built on secrets. The story of a German clerk who betrayed his nation to save others, and in doing so, rewrote the fate of a continent.